Well, good morning. We're back with part two of this innovation conversation about the daunting data dilemma facing the industry and some of the solutions that may be available to retailers and suppliers. Tom, good to see you again.
Good morning.
We're not fooling anybody. We're wearing the same clothes as we were wearing yesterday. So we just stopped. We just stopped the camera and then started it up again. Daniel Goldman, good to see you again. You are the Commerce Research and Insights Associate Manager for Accenture, and I appreciate you doing this. So yesterday we sort of laid out the context of the background and what you're trying to achieve. And today I think it makes sense to and also what your approach was in terms of the interviews and surveys and things like that. So let's talk a little bit about the six themes um, that you're working through on this, that you're kind of putting things in six different buckets. Number one, standards imperative. There needs to be a need for broader foundational data standards. Daniel, what does that mean?
Yeah, one of the consistent things we heard across all the executives we talked to, and that was true regardless of function, it was true regardless of company size, it was true regardless of where they were in the supply chain, whether it was a manufacturer, a wholesaler, a retailer, an agency service provider, was that every one of these organizations faces the continuous challenge of sourcing, integrating, and standardizing data from all their various partners, from their suppliers, from different channels, and that's both first-party and third-party data. And if we could find some way to get a single source of truth, even if it's just on some core basics, that will alleviate that challenge in a meaningful way across the supply chain, across the industry.
Interesting. It is interesting. I mean, I had to laugh when you said there's no single source of truth. It's not for the industry. It's not just the industry. That seems to be a societal problem. I thought I was the single source of truth for the food industry, though. So I was a little put off by that. What are the barriers to that kind of standardization?
There are a host of those barriers in terms of, why does this exist in the first place? Different companies organize their businesses in different ways. They have different product hierarchies in the way that they evaluate their performance and their competitors, and different data providers, whether those are syndicated or other data providers, view things in different ways, measure things in different ways, calculate things in different ways. And so that creates a host of barriers to standardization, whether it's cost, technical incompatibilities, and perceived benefits that different companies have of preserving what they believe is a source of competitive advantage because of their hierarchy or because of the way that they measure a certain metric, that sort of a thing. So it's both coming and going that there are barriers that need to be addressed.
Your second theme is benefits and risks, and how the value of improved data standards and sharing is universally recognized. Talk about that a little bit.
Frankly, we thought we might see a little pushback on this idea that, no, the way we're doing things is working and, we're making money off of it. But across the board, the benefits and the value of better standards, better transparency, and better data sharing with trading partners was recognized, and, reduced costs, increased efficiencies, higher value to the data itself if it's being shared and standardized across trading partners, creates more effective collaboration inside your company and with your trading partners outside your company, and just overall increases the likelihood of industry-wide success. It was stunningly universal, I would say.
Again, okay, this is once again where my cynicism is showing. Whenever I've had conversations with retailers about benefits and risks and costs and things like that, usually the question comes up, and it's not always put this way, but sometimes is, well, who's going to pay for it? Because, right, retailers like other people to pay for this stuff. They don't, if they can avoid writing a check and get suppliers to write the check, that's what they're going to do. Did you bump into that when you were talking to retailers, where you met any resistance in terms of them having to actually have to invest in this thing?
I think so. We didn't dig into the mechanics of how this would really happen. We were, exploring the pain points. And so it's certainly reasonable that we were getting the assumption that everyone else is going to adapt to my way of doing it, and that would be lovely. No one said that outright, but that could have easily been the perspective that a lot of folks were taking here. But your point is well taken in terms of how is this going to happen? There are real costs. and there are real risks to better transparency, to data sharing, and those costs need to be borne by somebody, and there are only so many dollars to go around. At the same time, a lot of those dollars are being spent on trying to get your data organized and synchronized and standardized. So there's money to go around there somewhere. How that gets organized is yet to be determined.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think, most companies have significant budget put toward, data management, for lack of a better term. Um, and I think that if you're able to get, better internal and external alignment, internal, that's up to you, right? But if you're able to get this kind of cross-partner alignment, better established, I do think it enables you to get more ROI out of the dollars you're already spending. So I don't know that there's a lot of incremental spend that would have to come, be able to, kind of work within these industry standards. Probably a little bit, but I don't think it doesn't necessarily need to be a significant incremental investment.
A reallocated spend can be as difficult for these retailers as incremental spend, right?
Sad, but true.
Yeah. So okay. Number three, you talk a little bit about God, we've talked about this a lot on Morning Newsbeat over the years, FSMA Rule 204, how this actually creates it creates a unique opportunity because it does seem to be seems to be highly specific in terms of what the regulations are going to demand of the industry and what the industry will get out of bettering its use of data to comply with the rules.
Yeah, this was, unsurprisingly, a topic that came up a lot, and we let these conversations go wherever they were guided by whomever we were speaking to. So we didn't specifically direct people to talk about FSMA, but it came up because it's going to force compliance of sharing very specific kinds of data, having specific kinds of tracking. And so that requires the sort of transparency, standardization, and sharing that we've been speaking about more broadly. But one of the barriers that kept coming up was that people were telling us, my biggest challenges are that my supply chain partners aren't collecting and sharing the right data with me. They don't have it. In some cases, for smaller players, there's just still a lot of brute force in the way things are done in the industry, that it's not necessarily digitized and standardized. And so you get these inconsistent data formats, you get things missing, you get stuff that needs to be digitized. And it creates a real moment where modernization efforts, investment in that regard, could really play a key role, not just in FSMA compliance, but in unlocking other ways of doing business.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I've had some experience with this because I've done a lot of work with ReposiTrak over the years, right? And they've been intimately involved in helping and trying to help retailers comply with FSMA rules. And one of the things that I learned out of it was that retailers often would take the attitude. Some retailers were cool, right? Okay, we got to do this. We understand what the reality, why we need to do it, and why it's beneficial for us in the long term. But there are a bunch of guys out there, and I'm saying guys. I don't mean just men, although largely, whose attitude is, maybe the next administration will change the rules, and maybe we'll be saved from having to do this. So, and so they don't see it as they see it as a regulatory cost issue. They don't see it as a consumer trust issue and why it matters that way. So I would imagine that that's one of that could be a hurdle. It's a unique opportunity, but that's sort of maybe widespread is too big a word. It is a common perception among retailers that maybe the government will come in and change the rules so they don't actually have to do it. So. I don't mean to be throwing cold water on your unique opportunity, but that's I'm just reacting. Okay, consumer needs. Talk about consumer centricity and how this helps that.
I think it's becoming increasingly clear that being consumer centric is recognized as critical to industry success. That's true both for manufacturers and for retailers. And as part of this exponential data growth, there is so much more consumer data than ever before. Consumers are engaging through apps, they're engaging through the web, they're engaging directly with brands through digital coupons, traditional coupons, loyalty programs, in-store shopping data is there, various other touch points, but it is so abundant that it's difficult and expensive to harness all of that data and to commercialize it. And what we heard is that the companies that are doing the best at knowing their customers and running their businesses around their customers, what their customers want, what their customers need, the way their customers shop, the way they meet the needs of their customers in day-to-day life, are unlocking real value that their competitors are missing. And that is a story that we heard repeatedly. And those who aren't doing it know they ought to be, and they would like to. But those who are really ahead of the curve had some great stories to tell about the ways in which this has been just an eye-opener and a value unlock.
Well, and Tom, we've talked about this on
Yeah.
this conversation, I don't know how many times over the past almost 10 years, but one of the things that retailers are not particularly good at doing is being transparent with consumers about their data and how it's being used, right? And they sort of, and so that's forget just creating trust between the retailer and the supplier. You've got to create trust with the consumer. And this actually plays into your next theme, which is how retail media sort of can play a role in this, and how this serves the retail media trend, fad, whatever you want to call it, in a really positive way. But as I keep hammering on Morning News Beat, so many of these retailers are using retail media as a way of just generating advertising revenue as opposed to being customer centric. See, in some ways, the whole idea of the customer centricity that you're talking about and the retail media opportunity that you're talking about, they play with each other, but also they illustrate to me the pitfalls here.
Which is
the consumer's not always at the center of this.
No, and yet, a well-orchestrated retail media strategy that truly leverages the consumer performance data or behavioral data in a positive way. And I agree, totally should be transparent with the customer as to how you're using it. Because done right, you are doing it to serve them better, because better retail media placements that customer touches will convert. And that when that happens, the retailer wins, the advertiser wins, and most importantly, the shopper wins, the consumer wins, right? So, I don't know, that's a super kind of altruistic, way to look at it. And, there are multiple competing interests here, in the equation, and different players can benefit from an imbalance, in that. But, I think a significant imbalance, or imbalance is significantly occurring, can, potentially, I don't want to say retail media will collapse, because of it, but it'll definitely stress, its long-term viability.
Sure.
If you're not serving the end customer.
Yeah. And you use the word altruism. Again, I don't get too far down this rabbit hole, but the problem is that a lot of people in the industry view transparency with the consumer as being altruistic as opposed to being smart business.
Right.
Right. And then,
it's very smart.
Until they get to the point where they realize in the long run, maybe not in the short run, because it may cost you some money in the short run, but in the long run, it's smart business. I just think these are really hard obstacles to get over.
And it shouldn't really cost you much. I don't know. I don't think it should cost you much money in the short term, unless you're completely exploiting it, right now. To me, it seems like there's a real win here by being transparent.
And finally, the last thing we talk about is the notion of talent and technology, that if this has the ability to attract a lot of talent to the industry and unleash a lot of talent and technology that could really, as I see it, be a prime driver of the industry going forward, not just for a few years, but for a long, long time. Daniel?
Yeah, companies need to have both of those things, right? And if you just have the data, congratulations, that's table stakes. You actually have to be able to do something with it. And to do something with it, you need the right digital core, you need the right infrastructure and architecture, and you need people who know how to use it and can not just extract it, organize it, make sense of it, but also share it and make it legible to the non-data folks within their companies and that they're doing business with. Not everybody is going to be a data scientist. Not everybody is going to be a data analyst, nor should they be. And so if you got to have that underlying core we talked about earlier, and you got to have that talent. And one of the challenges that we've heard right now is that, the food industry is not as sexy as some other industries for data folks and for data scientists and for technologists, but it's growing and it can be that. And so part of what the industry needs to do is make that opportunity known and really be intentional about attracting that top talent and focusing on that innovation and right technology for that talent to use and to play with every day, because that's the way that you're going to get ahead and that you're going to really capitalize on this situation.
Okay, so we've laid out the themes. We've talked about what precipitated all this. Okay, and so you've done the study. You have a handle on what the problem is. So what are the next steps? What happens from here?
Yeah, so I would say from an industry standpoint, we think that it's going to be important to continue to have to continue to raise the profile of the issue and the opportunity. As you said, folks have recognized this challenge, for years. And I think one thing we didn't state yesterday's episode, or today's, one thing that was very clear throughout is appreciation for the work that GS1 has done
Right.
over the years. And in the kind of core atomic item level, data standards and whatnot have widely recognized that has been, a long time coming, and it's happened over a long time, but that's been, the industry is benefiting from that. So now it's, what's next, as far as how we can, build these frameworks around, both internally generated data and then, the data that we share, across companies. And that can be, from retail performance to supply chain to consumer, across any of that. So, I think we need to continue to keep this in the industry dialogue. We will continue through Accenture, and what may be coming next. We'll continue to get to gather feedback, continually build engagement. We had put out in the report the potential for some kind of industry type steering committee around this. So that's being considered now. Certainly nothing formal yet, but thinking about what that could look like, what the committee could be charged with, how the committee could run, and what could potentially be some of the output from that committee. And then what are the kind of tool sets that can be introduced around this, to help folks, kind of jointly measure on a consistent basis. Is there some kind of harmonization that has to happen to data? Are there analytical tools that will, enable this to work better? Just all that stuff that needs to be figured out, and then continue to report back, to the industry on the progress here. So, what's next, I think is, not sitting here and just staring at the report and saying, boy, what a good job that report was, but it's actually, trying to now activate this and get the industry making some progress.
I was going to say, Daniel, I certainly am not suggesting the creation of bureaucracy, but without some kind of infrastructure, without some model, and I don't know what that is willing to sort of take this on and put meat on the bones of what, and you guys have, it's an impressive skeleton that you've created, but without meat that actually says, okay, you can sign up here, you can do this, we'll help you do that, without something. And maybe that's the role that Accenture plays, but without doing that, this just remains good ideas focusing on a pressing problem, and it's got to move beyond that, or the industry is just, again, it's going to find itself behind the eight ball.
I think that that's well recognized and well said. And that's where a couple different things come in, as we're looking for sort of outside forces to nudge people in the right direction, nudge companies to get to actually taking action here. One is what Tom just mentioned, which is that industry kind of committee formation or something along those lines to push it from an industry level. And the other outside force is FSMA at the moment, assuming that doesn't go away and doesn't change. But you've got then two different pressures coming that can work together to actually get some change here in the industry.
If they want to find out, people want to find out more, where do they go? What do they do? Who do they talk to?
I think there are a couple places. One is reaching out to us directly at Accenture, of course. The other is the report is available for download on FMI's website in their research library. You can certainly start there and see these ideas in more detail as much as you'd like, and certainly reach out to us to continue the conversation.
Yeah, within the report too, if you go find it on FMI's site, it's a free report, as Daniel said, to download, and Daniel's contact info is in there.
Okay. And I'll put that information obviously in the text here on Morning Newsbeat. I have one last question. So Daniel, before you got involved in the industry, as I understand it, I want to make sure I get this right. You were a practicing clinical neuropsychologist. Is that right?
That is true. Yes.
So, putting that hat on for Tom's laughing. Putting that hat on for a second, do you think? I mean, we can talk about all about the cultural and the logistical issues that the industry would have to deal with to get this done. What about the psychology of the industry? Talk to me, give me a minute on what is the psychological hump that the leaders in this industry have to get over to get this kind of stuff done?
I think it helps to think of it not as being the industry doing something, because an industry doesn't do something. Individual people make decisions. Individual people take actions. And you have to think of it at the individual level. And not to be too cynical about it, but fundamentally, it has to be framed and put forward in a way where we can successfully answer the question, what's in it for me? And that gets back to what you said before about, what's the ROI on this? How is this going to reflect in my performance evaluation? How am I going to make my company, my division, my department perform better? How am I going to lift my boat here? And if we don't do that, nothing's going to happen. There is that altruism component. Oh, this would be great for the industry. It'd be nice if we did this, but I got things that really I have to focus on because that's how I'm being compensated and evaluated. And if I have time to get to that other altruistic thing, I will, but that's not my priority. And so when you're thinking about behavior, it's about incentives and it's about individual context. And you have to bring those two things together to get people to change.
That is an outstanding way to end this. Daniel Goldman, I really appreciate this. It's been fascinating. I hope you'll come back as progress hopefully is made and kind of keep us up to date on what's going on. And Tom, it's just another adventure, right?
No, this has been great. And I'll tell you, I've really enjoyed this project, the Accenture team, the FMI team, everybody we spoke to in the industry, and there were dozens. It's been a really, really fun project, and most importantly, it's been awesome to work with Daniel and get to know him a little bit through this and get to see him in action in these interviews and whatnot. It's we brought a lot of really interesting data to the surface, and I think it was just really well done, and just really pleased and fortunate to have gotten to work with Daniel on this.
Well, thanks, guys, and thanks, everybody. This is the Innovation Conversation, a special two-parter this week, and we'll see you next time, everybody.